All right. Hey, Kumar, thanks for joining us today on another session of Behind the Scenes. This is a new initiative that I've been taking with VergX, where I get to sit down with some really influential people, not just in the technology space, but quite honestly, all over the place. And it's an avenue where I'm able to ask different type of leaders questions that may be outside of the boilerplate type things. For those that don't know us, we've got a long relationship. VergX has been partnered with Versa for a long time. I'm extremely excited about the news, about where Versa is inside the market. So I first want to congratulate you, your efforts. And for the people that don't know about you, you are the founder, former CEO, and current Chief Development Officer of Versa Networks. Before we go forward, I'd really love for you to just take the time, explain your background, what you're up to, and a little bit about Versa.
Yeah, sure. Chris, first of all, thanks for inviting me. And clearly our association goes a long ways. Thank you for the business relationship which we are having here. And I really appreciate the trust. So first of all, something about me. I mostly work in startups building cutting edge technologies. For example, I've held senior management positions at Yago Systems, Cabletron, and Riverstone Networks. And subsequent to that, I was hired by the Juniper founder to help them build a career class edge router and a metro Ethernet product line. And Juniper was facing a lot of competition from Cisco 7600, so they definitely wanted us to come and develop a product line which would be allowing them to compete against that product line. The initial project we started with at Juniper was, they had the M and T series core and edge routers. How do you increase the port density for those routers? So, we developed what I call IP2 picks to increase the port density. Subsequent to that is when the product for which I was hired, we started developing. It's the MX series of carrier edge routers, and to compete against 7600. Both these products, IQ2 and MX, were huge success. Today Juniper makes approximately $1 billion a year from MX series. And presently, not a single packet traverses from source to a destination on the internet without at least crossing one of the MX routers. Subsequent to that, Chris, 4G was coming up, and I was told to develop a whole 4G packet core line. And for those who are mostly dealing in BGP and MPLS and stuff like that, the whole packet core functionality is their own. They have their own sort of like the language and their own terminologies. And we develop S gateway, P gateway, which are essentially signaling and forwarding element. MME is also signaling element, SGSN and GGSN. And it was one of the most technologically advanced product of that time. So that was all my background before I started Versa. Then around 2012, we started Versa in Q4, exactly about 8 years ago. And we felt like, that there are a few macro trends which are going to come into the being. One is that the software is sort of disaggregated from the hardware. The networks need to be a lot more programmable, and automation will be what is really needed. And clearly, the last is it's all about user to application networks. which is what is going to be more important. So we started Versa Networks. That's a long answer for you, Chris.
Well, listen, I appreciate it. And a lot of people don't know, if I take a Wizard of Oz reference, they don't necessarily know the wizard behind the curtain there, but it's very important to understand that. For me, when I hear that, it just shows that, Versa is able to simplify the network, whether it's stepping in to be a core router. You can see that it has that integrate into the DNA just based on your foundation. It has that gateway element because you're seeing where does the traffic want to flow and the backbone, and it just shows that it starts from the founder's beginnings and just how you saw how technology was changing. So being able to be a core router, the gateway functionality, obviously the SD-WAN, and what I always thought was very interesting is that you had this belief that you couldn't necessarily step into an SD-WAN conversation, okay, unless you're prepared to have a security discussion. And now that SASE and all this different stuff is coming out there, right? Versa's always had security integrated in. So, and I know this is outside the questions we've been talking about, but I told you it would become conversational. One question I have for you is that, was security always such a major component, or how did you see security with SD-WAN? Was it, because a lot of your competitors, they have, third-party capabilities, but you made a decision to have it integrated in, and that seems like it was a conscious decision. So I'm curious, why?
Yeah, I mean, look, Chris, today in this digital economy, which is basically conducted over digital networks, there's no network really which is worth having where security is not built into it from the ground up. And that's what we realized it upfront, that without having security, that network is not worth much. Okay, and so we started developing security in Q4 of 2012. We put a team together who's been there, done that, so that their experience and the lessons they've learned can essentially be put into practice here. And we wanted to kind of come up with a technology which had both network and security properly integrated, not like security was an afterthought, or not like SD-WAN was an afterthought. What happens normally is when a technology becomes popular, there'll be people coming in from different fields and different wannabes, who want to be in this technology. The WAN optimization guys also wanted to be SD-WAN player. The security guys also want to now do networking, and the networking is not in their genes. And then you have the networking guys who try to do security as different blade and they kind of combine it at a level of the orchestration system rather than having built into the packet path, where security and traffic engineering, all of that is done in a single pass. So that our architecture is multi-core parallel processing single pass architecture, and you couldn't have done that without building it from the ground up.
So just to stay on the theme, and a couple more questions that I have there is, you've been a product guy, okay? You've been an executive, still are an executive. Then you launch a startup, you start to grow that, and having all those different experiences, what have been some of the biggest, I guess, learning curves, or what have been some of the takeaways that you've had from going from product executive leading a startup to now CDO of a market leader in not just the SD-WAN space, but also the security space?
Yeah, so I think, Chris, first of all, there are sort of like when you're a product guy in an established company, let's take example of where I came from, Juniper. these organizations are very much siloed. The engineering leadership meets customer not that often as they should, compared to startup engineers. Our engineers are meeting early adopters of our technology, essentially improvising and iterating the technology with them. And that is where the fun lies, is how do we make the technology relevant before it comes out and not go into some cubicle and design something without really talking to the customers. So that definitely is a great experience for startups. And that is where the startups really shine, as long as they are always, they always are, look, when you present something to the customer say, oh, this idea is not so great, while this idea is great. You got to be willing to listen to both the good as well as the not so good in terms of making sure that your technology stays relevant when it comes out, and you have to listen to your early adopters. The not so fun part in startup, Chris, is that startups always have limited funds. So, for example, one of the early things at Versa was, like if I was at Juniper, I would have, if let's say for talent, for whatever reason, for family reason or whatever, they want to move, they want to leave. In an established company, you would have a huge bunch of folks with similar experience, and they'll always be there to take it up. They're already working on it to some extent and all that. While in the startup, you don't have that luxury. You can be creating redundant people, and that if someone leaves, you do feel impact. So that you're fundamentally operating without any kind of redundancy in startups. The execution in an established company has challenges too. It is slowed by processes, and also you have to get buy-ins from multiple lobbies within these established companies. And each of the lobby or the BU is looking at their vested interests rather than seeing the big picture here. While, execution in startups is pretty much unencumbered by all these heavy-duty processes and politics of BU politics and all that other stuff. So you could innovate at a much faster pace and not have to do suboptimal innovation. For example, let's say if you're doing XYZ widget, you say, oh, well, if you do this functionality in XYZ widget, then you are now getting into my BU offering and all that other stuff. None of that matters in startups. So you really come up with, in startups, when you develop products, those are extremely well thought out products without any kind of shortcuts into, hey, we don't want to do this because this particular BU product will get hampered and so on and so forth. I hope that answered your question, Chris.
No, it did. I mean, basically what you're saying is in startups, it's no BS. It's about let's do the right thing, and you don't have a lot of the same bureaucracy. And a couple of things you said that I want to make sure that folks listening actually heard. And I know this firsthand because over the years, and I'm thinking back early day Versa, guys basically trying to find a seat by the front door because you guys are, growing so much. And that was a fun time to at least to have shared that experience. I've had a lot of really great market discussions with you. And over the years, you very much are inquisitive of what's going on around you because that may dictate where to go. And it's not necessarily saying, hey, here's the shiny object, let's go, put it to the market. It was also, let's validate it. And, you leveraged a lot of what we have with our distribution. And I thought that was very wise. So I want to make sure people hear that, you are a big proponent of understanding and getting critical feedback and then making the adjustments. And I always thought that was very interesting with you. Now, one question, I'll skip ahead, because you did bring something up. And obviously, when you are growing a startup, there's the talent pool, and you're growing, and that's always a consideration. And to retain such critical employees, obviously culture is a big part. So I always am curious, how do you as a leader maintain that culture inside of Versa?
Yeah, Chris. Culture, frankly, is I would say is the most important foundation of the company, right? So it all starts from making sure that you do proper due diligence during hiring to make sure you'll get alignment of culture. And by the way, we made our mistakes too, where we've hired an Einstein who doesn't believe in following our culture, and we've had our share of mistakes too there, and we learn from it and we improve on it, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it'll be not right for me to say that we got it right the first time. So clearly we definitely had our missteps, at least on a few occasions. But you do definitely want to make sure that hiring is the first step where you make sure that the alignment of culture happens. And our culture is all about respect, humbleness, integrity, merit, teamwork, innovation, and initiative. And we look at these traits from a perspective of we ask questions which call out those traits. And addition to that, what happens is, some of these words are like for example, let's say respect. What does respect mean? They have to essentially boil down to what, you have to explain those culture, which is like, let's say, example, respect as, behaviors which people can observe. And those behaviors are what you want to inculcate in your team members. For example, respect could be anything like, you have to be a great listener, you have to respect ideas from other people too, and so on and so forth. So that's one aspect to it. The other aspect to it is also, like you said, as you scale the company, how do you make sure that the culture stays intact? And I think what we've done is we built a library of content, which essentially gives, we have sourced it from the third party, which goes into, how do you produce those behavior, and those by watching those content, people understand that, those words, which is respect, humbleness, and so on and so forth, what does it boil down to in terms of observed behavior? So that is definitely one place where we've done it. And lastly, we don't believe in doing this huge, like 5-day course on culture and so on and so forth. We are more into things like full training, where the training is there, and you just sort of attend it whenever you want to, whenever you have to do, and it's self-paced. It's not something like, let's attend 5-day course on culture today. None of that thing.
Right.
And then also, Chris, at the end of the day, your managers have to reinforce the culture and recognize folks who follow the culture and the behavior they show. Recognize them in the wider audience.
Yeah. So you've defined out what you want that culture to be, and I know you take a lot of pride in Versa, and I would just let people know that one of the things in culture should be hard work if you're going to define it out, because I don't know many people that outwork you. I know it motivates me. I try to work just as hard as you do, but you're definitely an extremely hard worker. You're always attentive, always there. But what I heard is you define out what you want that culture to be. You've put in place tools to maintain that as you're scaling, that people are all assimilating to that same type of culture. And then ultimately, you got to hold the folks accountable, because a bad seed will spread, and you don't want that. And it's important to keep on keeping your down and maintain the culture. So I think that's a very interesting thing. And if hopefully entrepreneurs listen to this, they take it from somebody that has gone through the growing pains. Obviously here at VergX and powered by the Versa solution, we've leveraged the strategic relationship to grow, not at the same size as Versa, but that resonates very true to what I've experienced as well. So I find that to be really helpful, and I hope others do indeed. Now, my background, I played tennis growing up. My brother was my best partner. I will say that we were successful mostly because of me, although he'll say it was probably because of him. But for people that don't know this, I mean, you're a family-oriented man. Your brother, Purva, is part of Versa. He's a core driver of it. You guys have had a successful relationship throughout business. What is it like to work with your brother? And then how has that relationship been? Because you guys have done phenomenal things throughout the technology world.
Yeah, actually, that, Chris, is a great question, frankly, because, it's, let me see, how do I answer this? So, first of all, working with family member has its pros and cons, okay? In my brother's and my case, in our case rather, what happens is we both have different skill set, okay? Apurva is a person who can take that subject and go 2 mile deep, while I can kind of quickly go into multiple things, but not at the same level of depth as he can. So clearly our skill sets are very different, and that way we complement each other and we don't get in each other's way. But that doesn't mean that everything is rosy. Frankly, we do argue a lot about certain aspects, and sometimes Kelly is a peacemaker. That also happens. But what happens at the end of the day, Chris, what I find is startups are very hard, and the last thing you want to worry about is the trust with your partners and stuff like that. I mean, it's your own brother. That part is taken care of. You don't have to worry about
right.
that. So that is definitely a big plus. And I think funny thing, this industry's got so many examples where the brothers work together and build great things. And I think part of it is there's that trust, and part of it is also there's the complementing of what each brings to the table. If imagine if both of us had the same talent, then we would be definitely arguing a lot more than we are arguing now. So you can think about that. So that then it becomes detrimental to the company. So in our case, we argue sometimes, but at the same time, most of the time, it's all he is focused on one area and I'm focused on the other area, and there's a lot of trust between us.
Well, that's awesome, and you're exactly right. If you identify, and I think that's even outside of necessarily just family dynamic, but ultimately seeing strengths, weaknesses, and being able to leverage and fill those gaps. I mean, ultimately, that's how you utilize a strong team and make sure that there's as little gaps as possible. So I know we're coming to an end, but there's a couple other questions that I have for you. And I've obviously really enjoyed our discussion. I always like speaking with you. One thing, now, I told you this before, I like to ask a couple questions similar to like that Inside the Actor Studio format. One question that I've always asked other business leaders is what keeps you up at night, if anything?
Well, let's see. I think there are a few things which are extremely important as you scale a company, Chris. One is, are we keeping the hiring standards in the company? Are the hiring standards maintained? Are we as a group constantly innovating and providing the value to the customer? Are we maintaining the culture as we scale? And lastly, the most important thing also is, are we providing a great experience to our customer, who are trusting us, who's given us the business. So those things clearly are extremely important. Look, on the one hand, it's all about bringing in the right set of folks and maintaining the hiring standards, making sure the culture stays intact. On the other hand, are you innovating and not becoming fat, dumb, and happy? And lastly, are you really providing a proper, are you staying relevant to your customer? Are you giving them proper support? Extremely important. In the end, at the end of the day, that is what will. Those are fundamental things which will take care of the rest of the business.
Yeah, you sound so. Like my mind, it's not necessarily the, is the network okay, right? I mean I think that there's a baseline of you have the right team, the right folks, they're competent, the right network, the right technology, all of that stuff is there. But at least for me, I'm always thinking about the next thing, right? It's like the light switch doesn't switch off. So I'm always thinking about different aspects. Is there a different enablement that we could be doing? Is there a different way to look at something? Is there something else that can help, define out culture and so forth? So it seems like our minds are always going, but in a forward direction, which I think is important, especially you as a leader of Versa and an operator and product guy and executive. You always got to be continuing to move the ball forward and keep being in a positive direction. But the last thing that I have for you, and it's another question similar to the last one, and I guess part of it, we do know what the market is saying about you because you're a Gartner leader, and that's what it's coming out right now, and that's really exciting, especially for us that have been there in relatively the beginning with you. But one question I always ask again is, if you heard the market speaking about you, what would you like them to say?
That's a difficult question. Let's see how I can answer that. Look, one of the things I myself like to do is, like you said, how can we do something different in the previous, just like a few minutes ago you said, so for me, when you build technology, and it gets widely deployed, for folks like me at least, it is immensely satisfying. And it doesn't get widely deployed in a vacuum, It gets widely deployed because, you provided the customer value, you provided the right experience, you provided the right support, and in the process, the technology gets widely deployed. So, to me, that is very important because the last thing we want to do is build something which nobody uses, right? So clearly that doesn't help anybody. So for us, that is that. And so what I would really think, I would hope to hear is, here is Versa team that has built a very innovative company from nothing and has grown to be a market leader in secure SD-WAN and SASE. And that is essentially what I would say I'd like market to remember me as well as my team as, a team which is constantly building innovative products and staying one step ahead of the market as to what they need and as well as, fulfilling the need which is out there in our customer base.
Well, I would say that the market's already seeing that, and based on where you're sitting in the market with the Gartner and all the other different reports that have come out, it's phenomenal. Like I said, being a powered by shop and what we've had in this success together, obviously, my sentiments there. I want to thank you again for everybody listening. Kumar Mehta, founder, former CEO, current CDO, all-around great guy, hardest worker in the industry, Versa Networks. Thanks again, Kumar.
Thank you, Chris, for inviting me.